All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. And our guest today is Sadhu Dah. I assume I'm still saying that correctly.
Yep.
All right. And our topic today is Guman Thong. But let's talk first a little bit about you and what you do to let our audience know. Of course, you've been on before a few months back, but let's remind them. What would you classify yourself as? I mean, I know you got a diverse collection of belief systems and ideas. So what would you call yourself?
In a nutshell, I'd consider myself a spiritual teacher and an occult professor. In Thai culture, an occult professor would be known as an ajarn. So that would be more closely related to kind of encapsulating all of what I do.
So I got to hop right in here now. I'm interested. When you say occult, I'm like, first thing I think of is Lovecraft and Miskatonic and stuff. In Thailand, you say that they have a separate name. Is this something that they would take, for lack of a better word, more seriously than is taken here?
Yes. So
as a profession?
Yes. I mean, there are people who seek that out as a career. One of the things that's very common in Thai culture is you'll have a lot of young men who will join, the temples and go under monkhood, and they'll become a bhikkhu. In Theravada Buddhist culture from Thailand, that would be a monk. So they become a bhikkhu. They become ordained for a couple years, kind of get their feet wet. If it's not for them, it's not for them. But some of them will learn magic or Thai wicca. Different traditions of certain practices of making like amulets or doing like love spells and charms and like wealth and prosperity for businesses and etc. Just like a whole manner of things. And then you'll get people who are considered like lay persons with magic. And these are people who may not ever become a monk, or they might become a monk and then leave the monkhood. And they'll choose to embark on this career where they study under Lersi, Ruisi, Ajarns, Kru Bar Ajarns, and all these different like classifications of like what we would call like spiritual teachers who teach certain types of traditions and practices. And so it's a huge, huge part of the culture. It saturates it all the way through its core. I mean, you can go and see like a schoolhouse or a government building and just out in public, because like 98% of Thailand is Theravada Buddhist, you'll see what are called Samphra Kum, which are these little spirit houses, and they're all out in public, and like they're, given offerings, and they're to appease the local spirits in the land. So, I mean, these practices are deeply rooted because, Siam, as it was formerly known before it was Thailand, was very animistic. Like think of like shamans and like Native American culture and some of those animistic traditions and practices. This has been like a long-standing part of Thailand's culture and history, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so like what ended up happening in the 14th century was, the king was trying to convert people to Buddhism, and it didn't fully stick and take over, because you had so many people that did things like nat worship, and they were like, well, we've been praying to these coconuts and these spirits for like, generations. Like, you're not just going to tell us that we need to start worshiping this Buddha guy. And, what do we care? We have our own practices and traditions. Well, then it kind of became mandatory. And then, so as we know with conversion, especially like in like African cultures and the slave trade, and how they would pray to these statues of the saints, but they were really praying to their voodoo gods and stuff like that. So like, they kind of continued the same thing. And so you get this beautiful emergence of a truly unique form of Buddhism, where you have these animistic and old and very like occult, magic traditions influenced in with Buddhism. And so you have people that will go and they'll study it, and they seek to learn how to make these different amulets and charms and do these different spell practices for the community.
It's weird how the commonalities of man across across the globe, because it doesn't sound much different than the Holy Roman Empire coming into Europe and Britain, how they end up merging a lot of that stuff. And, Christmas we know is a combination of Yule and Saturnalia and all this stuff, Halloween and All Saints Day, All Souls Day, so it's kind of like an appropriation of the religion, but the religion lives on within it.
Yes.
Countrywide, this whole view of mysticism is accepted, or religion wide, or would this be like this sort of Kabbalah sect of the religion at this point?
Oh no, it is. It's so deeply ingrained that it's just part of everyday society. I mean, I'm sure maybe you've gone into like, a local donut shop or nail salon or something that's like, whether it be Cambodian, Vietnamese, or Thai owned business, or even like a Malaysian owned business. And, a lot of these Asian and like South Asian like countries will have, statues of like Nang Kwak for like luck. You see like, like a statue of a lady, and then they have like coins, or they have like incense they're burning and stuff. And it's just, they're in their business, here in America, but like that comes from, their home country. And it's like such a common practice, because like Nang Kwak was the daughter of a merchant. And, it comes from an old Buddhist story where, the Buddha had told this merchant who often would have trouble selling his wares. And he had this daughter whose name was Nang Kwak. And Nang Kwak would always want to go with him, but like the father wouldn't take her with him, because I don't know, like maybe he figured she was going to get in the way of the business, that kind of thing. Well, the Buddha told the merchant, bring your daughter with you and you will sell out all your wares. And so he did. And from that day forward, he would always bring her with him. And so at some point, that story became kind of like canonized in a sense. And so much so did Nang Kwak, and her image and the representation of her and abundance and wealth with business practices. So now you have like fayant, like, so these cloths that have like an image of her stamped on it with like Pali Khmer like sigils and spells on there. And so like these are sold to business merchants, and they're said to like bring blessings and fortune to their business. And it's just such a common thing. Like you go into any of these kind of like shops and you'll see it, or at least like statues, representations of like Nang Kwak. And that's just like one aspect. You'll have like amulets and charms, like, some of the ones I wear, and, the Thai police will wear like takruts. So do the Muay Thai boxers, like around their arms. And they're said to protect from like accidents and injury. And, it's a normal part of culture. Just kind of the same here in America, where everybody's not Christian, but nobody bats an eye if someone says I'm a Christian, or if someone starts to pray. Right. Like it's very common. We're used to that being like a dominant form of religion that's, not to say it rudely, but it's so in your face that whether you're a Christian or not, you just kind of accept it, like that's going to kind of be around you. And it's just part of the culture here in America. And it's very same in like Thailand and Malaysia and Cambodia and, Vietnam. Like you just see these kind of things everywhere.
Right. So not too dissimilar from a pendant of St. Christopher when you're traveling.
Right. Exactly.
And I was raised Catholic. I didn't make it very far. My mom was over it pretty quick, but
yes.
Thailand's little golden boy. What? There has to be something lost in translation in this title.
So the eerie thing is, so Guman Thong is essentially like a spirit effigy. And the reason why it's called Thailand's little golden boy is because it's now illegal. But the way that they used to be made was, and this would fall into like barang, which is like black magic or like Thai voodoo. And what's really interesting to me is, we immediately hear the word black magic, or we think of like voodoo. And our mind kind of conjures all these dark thoughts, like people hurting each other, curses, hexes, that kind of thing. We think of like evil people preying on other individuals. And that's not really the case. See, in Thailand, especially with Thai magic, it's not so black and white, so to speak, no pun intended. But it's more of like, what is the intention behind it, regardless of the origin? So that kind of is, of most importance. So this would be black magic, yes, but not in the sense of what the Western mind considers black magic. So I
have to explain this a lot of the time when I'm talking to Christian. I'm a horror movie fan, and I'll talk to, and they're all, oh, I don't like the demon stuff, and we'll be talking about it, and like Asian cultures will use the word demon. So like my kids will watch anime and they're hucking around the word demon, and I'm like trying to explain to people, I'm just, oh, that's not a direct translation,
right?
Term. Sorry, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, so the Guman Thong, it's illegal now, but the way that they used to be made, and the reason why it was called Thailand's little golden boy, was a stillborn fetus would be taken and roasted and charred over a fire in a cemetery while prayers and chants were, performed over it, and certain ritual practices to appease, like, the guardian of the cemetery and, land spirits were performed. And then after it was charred, then it would be covered in gold leaf. And then the spirit of the stillborn child would then be adopted. And so it has like a very dark origin, but when you think about the way that people in Thai culture are seeing this and working with the spirit, it's actually kind of beautiful. So regardless of your beliefs, take into account this is the beliefs of the Thai people. So what they believe is that when a spirit will reincarnate, if it has not gotten to live a full life, so the full potential of an entire life, the stillborn spirit has been robbed of. So it's kind of like wandering around in the bardo, or like river Styx. So it's out there just alone. And the time it would take for it to actually reincarnate on its own and then be given another chance to live the human experience can be so far off in the future. So when these monks or these Ajahn or these different like Mophi and these spiritual practitioners who are taught how to do this specific type of Tai Wicca do this, they're kind of given this spirit like a contract. The spirit can kind of say no to this. It's not bound and restricted into this object. But what happens is the merit of a person who will adopt this statue is shared with this spirit. And when I say merit, I mean the good deeds, how they help other people, when they donate to charities, when they're kind. So these good karmic acts that they create, they're sharing it with this Guman Thong, so that when this Guman Thong achieves enough accumulation of merit that it wouldn't have the chance to achieve because it never got to live a full life, it will then be able to reincarnate faster, and it's going to have a higher incarnation when it reincarnates. So it's kind of like a huge, benefit to the spirit to like help, this business owner, or to help this person find a lover, or, the protection or, gambling and things like that. They're used in very, base level desire kind of things.
My comparison that I've thought about a lot is, and I know this is weird, but I'm going someplace with it, is like circumcision. It's very common in the Western world, getting less common, but I think, like, who was the first, the question might be, who was the first dude who did this to somebody? But my question is, who were the first parents that are just all like, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. You should test that out on my kid, And so here we are in this situation, and they're just all, okay, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cook your baby that didn't live, and we're going to wrap it in gold, and then we're going to use that to provide ourselves with our basic desires. That's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds a little Sounds a little rude.
Well, it came from Kun Pain.
And I'm not trying to come down on people's belief system. I'm just saying.
Oh no, it's something very bizarre and foreign to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not even considered weird at all in most, of Thai people. You know, they're like, oh yeah, Guman Thong, and they're all like, yeah, little golden boy. Like it's not even like weird thing. And there's a lot of amulets that have like chinathan, which is like human bone, and there's like naman pray oil, which is like human chin fat melted, from a grave. Like, I mean, they use like human body remains and like a lot of amulets.
A lot of chin fat.
I mean, I have a bottle of naman pray oil.
You have a bottle of chin fat back there?
Yeah.
All right. That can't be legal.
I mean, it's not illegal per se.
It's frowned upon. It's highly frowned upon.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like what's the goose liver? I don't know. It's all over the chef shows. Yeah. Okay. So that is weird, but I'm going to try to look at it from that standpoint, and that is the standpoint of community. Here's the unrealized life of this child, and now this unrealized life of this child now gets to be a part of the community and help us all move forward, maybe.
Yeah, and the way that it was first applied, so this is kind of like a modern day aspect of how they're used, because things kind of evolve over time. But it came from this old Thai legend about like this general known as Kun Pain. And Kun Pain, it's a pretty violent story, but then again, in a lot of like Thai love stories and like old tales, like they're very violent. And so Kun Pain, he killed his wife. I don't remember the reason why. I don't want to misquote it, but I know that he killed his wife. His wife was pregnant and he didn't realize it. And then when he realized what he had done, he decided to rip the stillborn fetus from the wife's body. And then he created the first Guman Thong. And so then he used that Guman Thong to like crush his enemies. And, that was like a whole thing. But the way that it became adopted into Thai culture was like parents who had lost a child. It was a very, very emotional thing. It's a very painful experience to go through. And they didn't necessarily want to say goodbye or let that go. And they had a hard time grieving. So they would take it, this stillborn child to monks or to these ajarn, and they would ask them to turn it into a Guman Thong. And then part of the practices that go into taking care of a Guman Thong is you buy it little toys and you give it, meals. When you eat meals, like you set food aside and you feed the Guman Thong, like, you offer it to come and eat with you. And like, you talk to it like a child and you praise it and you speak with it. So like, for all intents and purposes, even if you weren't understanding the occult aspect of this, one could see from a Western mindset, psychologically speaking, how for a parent who is grieving the loss of their child who died prematurely, that this could be very therapeutic in a sense. As strange as it may be, you could see how that could be very therapeutic for a grieving parent. So there is that aspect of it in the culture, how there are people who literally have like their own child that, was stillborn, and they've turned it into a Guman Thong, and they're raising this child, even though they're not physically alive.
I can guarantee you one of the questions going through anybody's head listening to this, and me as well, is what does this thing look like after it's made? So
now we have an understanding of like the illegal practice that's no longer done, but we have now effigies that are made, for example, so they'll use human bone ash and they'll make it like a little statue, as you can see.
Yeah, it's like it's like a black statue of a baby with some gold on its head and dressed in cloth.
Yes. So this is a Guman Thong. And then you also have ones that are made like as like a statue or like an amulet. So like a statue one, a wooden one I have, I'll show you. This would be this one right here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So a wooden statue that's been painted with gold, and it's small, like a large chess piece.
Yeah. So what they'll often do is they'll still do the traditional ceremony of like calling the spirit, and the occult practices behind that, the chanting of the kata, the infusing of the spirit into the object. But what makes it a Guman Thong, there's two requirements. One, it has to be the spirit of a child that died in birth, and then it also has to be like in the effigy of like like a little boy. So a Kumari Thong would be a little girl. So a Guman Thong would be a little boy. So there are female versions of it and there are male versions of it, but the male ones, for some reason, I don't know why, I couldn't honestly answer. Those tend to be more popular. And then you even have what are called lukrak, which is like an aborted one. So that's like an entirely different thing. So like that is like the the spirit was never even like fully formed. So almost like you could say like just like the cells of it, like like if you were to get an abortion and it's not even like fully formed as like
Right.
a
So
baby yet.
would a miscarriage count for that as well then?
Yeah. So those would be lukrak. So there's lukrak and there's Guman Thong. Guman Thong would indicate that like it was stillborn. So like it had actually reached the full end of gestation essentially, or enough to be like fully formed as an actual baby.
Now, when you showed me this, so when you were first telling me this, I didn't think of it as being bone ash that had been molded. I was thinking that they're cooking the like dried out. What was the original one?
That's how they
Maybe
were
a little
originally.
more grotesque, I assume.
Yeah, like it would be an actual like literal baby carcass. And like they would generally like, so what would happen is there was like a very common practice where like hospitals would like drop these off at the temples and then the monks would do the whole ceremony, or like parents would go to like an ajarn, or they would go to like a monk and they would have them make it, or they would get permission from a family member who had say over this, and they would actually go to the graveyard and dig up the child's corpse. So like that's how it used to be done, but in Thailand they made that illegal. So now if you do that, you will go to prison. You will get in a lot of trouble, and they're not allowed to be sold anymore. However, because adaptation, that's when it started moving into making the statues from like basically like clay mixed with actual bone ash. So like now they're not using the actual corpses anymore, but they're still using corpse ingredients, which for some reason isn't illegal. don't really get that.
I'm sure
but
there's a health factor going on.
Right.
Yeah. So what about here? I mean, so I got this friend, I'll leave his name out. In high school, we all played in bands together. It's a funny story. You know how when you get sick, you get a gland that will swell up,
Mm-hmm.
in your neck or something. Well, for him, it was his left testicle. And
Oof.
he couldn't show up to band practice because his left testicle had swollen up to the size of a softball and died, and they had to remove it. And another band member said, "Oh yeah, no, oh totally, man. I won't tell anybody." And he went and told everybody at school the next day.
Of course.
But they wouldn't let him keep it. We were like, "Oh, did you get to keep the testicle?" But they wouldn't let him keep it. So it's like, I assume this. I guess you can have a stillborn baby cremated, and they'll give you the ash, I guess, won't they?
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, you have the right to bury. I mean, so it's weird because like I haven't really encountered that over here. So I don't know, like, I would imagine it's probably not legal. What is it, like desiccating a corpse or something like that? I mean, I know
Right.
there
Yeah.
are like charges you can get for that. And I mean, clearly in Thailand, it's much easier to get away with going into a cemetery and doing things versus over here. We tend to have security guards and things like that. Things tend to be a little more lax over in Thailand. And in Thailand, like, they'll let you like keep your organs and stuff like that when you leave the hospital. They're different, they're different than over here.
Hmm.
So, that's kind of why that was kind of a thing for a while before it stopped being a thing. But yeah, I can't imagine that you would really be able to make one of those over here legally without some sort of suspicion or repercussion. Or if you like, let's say like you had a girlfriend or wife, or for whatever reason, they were down for that and y'all actually did that. If you tried to sell it or started showing and telling people about it, I'm pretty sure the cops would knock on your door at some point relatively soon.
Right. Yeah. All right. So you were showing me the amulet that you were wearing, and we were talking about this. Do they turn, or would you wear the Guman Thong?
Yeah, they do have amulets that are like small enough that you can wear. So this one I have is a Bayagay, which is a different type of amulet. It's like cowrie shell filled with mercury, and then it's sealed. And so like it's got like poly spells on it. It's used for like protection and like repelling black magic and things of that nature. And by black magic, I mean the stuff that's specifically sent to harm you. But the Guman Thong like necklaces and stuff that you could have, like I have one that I've been working on because I make amulets as well. So this one was like an actual necklace, but I turned this into like a spirit box and I added stuff to like empower it further. But you
I
can
see.
see how this would fit into a locket.
Right. I see.
It's the representation of the baby.
Yeah, it's like it was pressed and then it could be turned into a locket.
Yeah, so those will have like holy powders, bone ash, like different herbs and stuff, and like clays, and then it'll be like mixed together. And it's really interesting because like a lot of the ingredients that are added together for power tend to be things that would sometimes make scholars' heads just flip. Like to make some of the holy powders that the monks make. Um, this just sounds like, why would you do that? So they will take the oldest, most sacred and rare like Buddhist like books, that they'll have, and like scriptures, and like like, and we're talking really really old, like very valuable, and they'll take the pages from it and they'll burn them and they'll use the ash and mix it in with other ingredients. And it's like, well, why would you do that? Well, the rareness and the sacredness of it, like, is considered to give it more power. So then that becomes like ingredient, because when you add all those ingredients together, along with the kata, like the chanting, activating and calling the spirit and encoding with like the commands, and then you put the spirit in the object, all those sacred ingredients add to be like a battery, right? So they give the spirit, juice to operate off of, rather than you just basically having, this human spirit that might normally attach and feed on you. So then it has an actual source, an object, fetish or totem, right? That it can feed off of and accrue reciprocal energy that just is constantly feeding it. And so it's able to do things without having to have a human host to feed from.
This raises another question of illegality then. Is there an issue with a loss of historical knowledge because of this?
Yes. Yes. Like with some of these like sacred texts that they, are burning and using to make like, ashes. And it's not just for Guman Thong. Like these are, some of these ingredients are used in many different types of amulets as well. But like what we're losing is, it's interesting because it's like, we're losing some of that knowledge, but it's being transmuted, into a different fashion. So it's ironic because it's like, well, it's never really gone. It kind of lives on, right? It's in this amulet, but like, you're not getting to read what was on that text. You don't really know what it was about, right? So you're not getting that history, but like you have like a piece of that history. So,
well, like here in the States, I mean, we would probably outlaw that because of the.
Well, it's a historical artifact.
Right. Yeah. Because we have UNESCO stuff, and there's all sorts of. Although I do keep asking myself, with World Heritage sites, eventually everything's going to be a World Heritage site, won't it?
Right.
Enough time goes by. So with you wearing this amulet, and you got the other one behind you, is there? Again, I make the comparison to the pantheon of saints in Catholicism. Is there a pantheon with this? Because I mean, you can obviously only wear so many pendants at once. So are people sort of, well, in Catholicism, like people will pray to all the saints,
right?
And the saints when needed, but they tend to have their one that they go with. Oh yeah, I always keep my candle at this one saint that I'm into, or I don't even know how to put it because it's a religion that I'm not a part of. So it's like I don't want to crap on it, but I mean, I don't understand it. So is there like a pantheon in the way that people follow? Like, do they have favorites, for lack of a better term?
Favorites would be a better way to put it, because in Theravada Buddhist traditions, there's not a belief in God. Like there is a belief in like divinity and like heaven realms, meaning more than one, and like heavenly deities. And when I say heavenly, I don't mean like the context of the traditional Christian, word, but I mean like, beings from higher realms, higher vibrations, that are leagues above us in evolution and development, that we would consider like holy, right? So there is like sort of like a representation of like the bodhisattvas, like the Buddhas and these holy teachers and these divine beings are above like what are considered lower order spirits, like Lukrok, Guman Thong, Prey, like Mai Prey, like these various different like spirit statues and totems. So you'll have like I have close to like 60 different spirit statues. I have all kinds of different types. My favorite that I kind of like work with the most, and which I consider to be my most powerful one, is this little dude called Pong. And Pong is like this green little statue, and a lot of people say he looks pretty scary. I'll show him to you because a lot of people are like, why would you own that?
Oh, it is terrifying. Okay, so it's like a black skeletal ghoul thing with wide eyes and fangs.
And then it has real human hair from an actual dead body. And then there's a piece of chinatan, which is human bone from a woman's forehead who died in a car wreck. So this, this is like a very, and then you have like, here in the bottom, you have like a takrut, which increases the power, just like a rolled piece of sheet, like basically like copper metal thin, and it has like poly spells, encoded on it, and then it's rolled up. And so it's inserted in here for more of the power. And then you have this little bottle right here, which has the human ashes of a bunch of different people. And so like, yeah, most people would be kind of freaked out about this, but like this little guy is my most powerful spirit. He helps me so much when I'm doing work with like my clients and I'm doing healing sessions and I'm doing cleansings. And like when I do exorcisms, like, I mean, this is my wingman, so like I kind of have like a different relationship with some of these spirits than most people might kind of like look at. Like, these are like my friends. They're my children. They're my allies. Like, these are things that mean a lot to me. They're very close to my heart. So I don't expect other people to necessarily understand it, but, I'm not the only person that has that kind of like, association with some of these objects and tools. Cause that's essentially at the end of the day, they're allies and they're tools at the same time.
Right. So, one really interesting thing about that little guy is that it's a woman's. Okay, it's hard to skip over the fact that it has a chunk of lady bone on the back, but specifically it's a woman's forehead from a car wreck, which to me shows that it's at least evolving since the turn of the last century, because obviously cars didn't exist, so what they're using and the meanings of what they're using is still evolving.
Yes, but it's evolving off of an old precursor. And so that is the notion of, you have like certain elements, like, for example, certain things are considered like more powerful or to have like a lot of power. And that'd be like somebody, whether it's male or female, that died on the day that they were born. So like, let's say you were born May 16th. And then you end up dying like 1 year, like 30 years later, like on May 16th. So there's a lot of power in working with a spirit, like human spirit like that like died on their birthday. And then there's like the aspect of like, so for example, a woman who died in a car wreck. So that's based off of an intense and unexpected death occurrence. So that's so a female that had an intense and unexpected death occurrence is different than a female who died during childbirth. Both are considered to have strong spiritual power. That intensity of that death state, when they crossed into the spirit world, they are considered to have a lot of spiritual power and energy, more so than an old man who passed peacefully in his sleep. The energies are kind of more tame and crossing over.
I see. So the point here is not necessarily the car, that she died in the car. The point here is that it was a sudden, violent death.
Yes. So then there are some amulets that like I've seen that like some people might find really, really questionable. And I kind of have like mixed feelings about it because, one, I think that the permission from the family should definitely be given 100%. But like you have some that are actually like they'll be lockets and they'll have like the poly spells around it, and it'll have like human remains that aren't necessarily from that person, but it's human remains nonetheless. And it'll be a picture of like like a Thai prostitute or a female that was like raped and murdered and like suffered a very violent death. And then you have this picture of this person on this amulet that's being sold. And it kind of puts it into a different context and gives it a different, feeling entirely than like my Pong, spirit over here. When you're looking at the picture, like of an actual like girl in her late teens, early 20s, like actual picture of her, and you're realizing like the spirit of her and how she died, and that's in that amulet, like that one's, I'm kind of on the fence with that because like I'm not necessarily like really into those.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does feel like it's and again, I'm just going to throw out
too personal
thinking. I'm not. Well, it seems on the brink of exploitive.
Exactly, because I think of it so like I have this tattoo, that's my cousin Chris. So my cousin Chris, unfortunately, he was drinking and driving last year in April. And so it's been a little over a year now. And he passed away. And, it was a violent death. It was horrible. And he was young, he's 27, and I miss him greatly. And like, I have some of the pieces from the wreckage site, and like, I have pieces of glass from the windshield that he went through that has his blood on it. And I don't use that as an amulet at all whatsoever. I actually made sure that I crossed the spirit over, but I keep that as like, just like, it's something close to me, because like, it's all that I have left of him, and so like, that's kind of a completely different type of, item that I have. Like, it's not even used for magical purposes whatsoever. I would feel very emotional about somebody taking those pieces of glass with my cousin's blood on it and turning it into an amulet. I would have an issue with that. So like, I get what you're saying. Like that is exploitive.
So
a lot
it
of
has
times,
to be a part of the person's belief system. And and frankly, it's better than a lot of people here in the West do. It's like I'm constantly driving around and I'll see like somebody's Cadillac Escalade, and it's got a big sticker on the back window that says like, "In loving memory of John Smith," and that's all it says. And I'm all, does that mean the car is in loving memory of John Smith? What does this sticker mean? So my message to people out there is, don't put a sticker on your car that makes it look like your car is in memory to a dead person. It's weird.
It is weird. I mean, I'm kind of like, because like, I'm a stranger. I have no idea who anyone in your family or your loved ones are.
Yeah.
And then the only thing I'm knowing about you, a complete stranger that I wouldn't be paying attention to at all, is like, oh, that person in your life died and I'm staring at their photo,
Right.
or I'm like reading their death date. It's like, I don't need to know that. Like, I understand.
Like, did they want an Escalade in life? Why did you put this sticker on this thing?
No. Look,
So my point of saying this is, there might be some level of this stuff that you're talking about that might be a little more of a healthy relationship with death. My mom died when I was 17, so I had early death experience in my life. I had about 5 family members die before that, so I had to kind of come to terms with it at a fairly young age, and I feel that I have a very different dealing with death than other people do, and maybe it's detachment. I don't know. It's not that I don't care. It's just, there's beauty there to be had.
Right.
When somebody you love dies, I mean, do you curl up in a ball, or do you look outside and are the flowers a little brighter? Is the day a little, do you notice the life around you a little bit more? So it seems like there's some of that healthy belief system in what's going on.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where I am with like, the amulets that I would consider not to be like exploitive, is like, I'm working with the spirit, and I might have a deep and personal relationship with the spirit, and it might have the human remains, but to me, whether it makes sense to other people or not, and I'm sure you can kind of see where I'm at here with this, is it's entirely different when you're plastering the photo of somebody, and you're like, it was, this lady, such and such's name, born, succeeded by, this and this and this family member. And like, this amulet is her spirit, and, it has her remains in it, and you're using this spirit. Like, to me, that's just a little too much. It's like the Cadillac,
Right. Yeah. It's like, what do you hope to get? Because at first it kind of felt like helping the community, but I guess like you were saying in the beginning, there are intentions. Are you helping the
Yes.
community and your family, or are you helping yourself for personal gain?
Well, and not everybody that makes these spirit statues, the Guman Thong or the prey statues, so like an amulet, like what I described, or like this Pong that I showed you, like those are what are called prey, Prai, so prey statues. So, like, you know, the people that make it is really what matters most, because you'll have some that'll get like, you know, these darker spirits, and then they'll like feed them raw meat, and like you're never supposed to feed your spirit statues raw meat because like the meat makes them really feisty, really fierce. And then they'll sell these statues as like, you know, basically cursing statues, like to curse your enemies. And like, you know, I'm not really down with that.
All right, so we're not too far from the end here. Let's talk a little bit about your website, the Sadhu Dah, and what people can find there. Just to help people out, it's the SADHUDAH, the Sadhu. The Let me do it phonetically. The sadhudah.com. But we'll put a link up so that people can get it. You know, this is more than just a service website for you.
Yeah, so I have a blog and a link to my YouTube channel where I allow people to kind of see the rituals and some of the things I do to give a better idea and understanding of like the culture, and to see stuff that they would not normally have the chance to see, to read about things that you're not just going to commonly find on the internet, to get some of the genuine experiences, you know, detailed and provided for you for learning and study. And then I have like, you know, paranormal help guides and some of my blogs, like for people that are afflicted. You can reach out to me if you have a paranormal crisis situation, and then I will step in and I will help you with that situation. And then, you know, I teach people magic. I have amulets for sale. I have, you know, just kind of like a whole slew of resources and my services and things like that on there. And it's, you know, at the very least, it's an interesting website to check out.
Yeah, well, I will remind the audience that the last time we had you on, it was about exorcism. So there are services there to be had if needed. So is that the best place for people to get in touch with you?
I would say so.
Awesome. Well, you know, I've really enjoyed having you on. This is, you know, like I said at the beginning, I started reading what this topic was going to be about. And then I thought, I don't even want to read anymore. I want to just find out from you, because it's, you know, I don't know what our obsession is with these weird little, okay, this is not for you, this is me. I don't mean to be belittling. In the West, we kind of have this like underlying obsession with like the nooks and crannies of belief systems, you know, and for us out here it would be, and it's really interesting to see that there it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very interesting, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and as always, I enjoy it. You know, it's a great show. You ask good questions, and you know, I mean, Radio Wasteland. What's not to love about it?
Right, it's all in the title. All right, you've been listening to Sadhu Dah here on Radio Wasteland. Again, the website is thesadhudah.com, TheSadhudah.com. Thanks for checking us out.